Hello and welcome to Muscles Unlimited, a resource for bodybuilding and fitness related information. Today I'm going to discuss how much exercise is enough, which is kind of a topic that goes along with a lot of controversies. People seem to not be able to figure it out or come to a conclusion. And I don't know, I think I've come up with a pretty simple one myself. I coined a phrase that goes like this: the secret of bodybuilding is to know how and when to apply the right kind or dose of resistance, volume, and intensity at the right time to yield the optimal result. So what does that mean? It means that there's no right or wrong way. You know, like Bruce said, a way is no way. You know, be like water, be fluid. So in other words, one thing about training, and even though I'm a technician and a stickler for detail and so on, but the reality of it is that if you work out hard enough, you can do stuff wrong and still get results. You know, for instance, you get ready to do a set. Once you get into that squat bar, you can throw science out the window because it doesn't matter. At that point, it comes to what's here and here, okay? But never mind that. The fact of the matter is, back to the topic, how much is enough? Well, that's pretty easy, really, in my opinion. It's like if a person is truly training with high intensity, that in of itself is going to be your limiting factor as far as determining how much is adequate enough until you've got to the point where I call it either you've reached threshold or you filled up the glass or you've optimized and done everything possible to optimally achieve muscle growth, activate the growth mechanism, hypertrophy. So that being said, even though I don't put numbers or parameters, another argument is people want to break it down into succinct numbers, like, well, is 2 sets better than 3 sets or 4 sets? I mean, think about it, a set, what is a set? It's just a unit of measure. I mean, if you took a set of 10, 3 sets of 10, maybe 1 set of 12, 1 set of 15, 1 set of 8, and added up the number of repetitions, whatever it's going to come to, that's the number. So now, if it just so happens that accumulative number is enough to have adequately stimulated growth, well, that kind of answers your question. But to break it down into this many sets is what's necessary to get the job done is kind of, I think, ridiculous. It's not really an accurate way to measure it. But more accurately would be how the body responds to or doesn't respond to exercise. In other words, get to the point where if you reach threshold, if you reach that end point to the point where your body no longer responds, where you literally, let's say you're doing training your arms and you literally have trouble raising them anymore. There's been times where I train calves or I'm on my last set and the calves just don't work anymore. They don't want to function. They don't want to move. I think it's a pretty sure bet that I've reached that threshold. I've reached that end point. There's really no point. And here's my rule of thumb, which sounds really kind of basic, but I think it holds a lot of truth. Now, granted, in order to reach that point of threshold, to know when you've done that, you have to have the sensibilities and the acuity to do so. How do you do that? Well, if you're not training that hard, you're going to be chasing a rainbow all over the gym, thinking that, well, gee, what's next? What can I do to finally get to that point where I've got the job done? Well, it's never going to happen. You're going to be chasing forever because you didn't work hard enough. In other words, I could take a pencil and tap myself in the head with the intent of knocking myself out 1,000 times. Now, at the end of the day, I might have a red spot on my skull versus you take the baseball bat I have behind my refrigerator, hit me on the head one time, I'm not going to get back up. So have I reached threshold? Have I got the job done? Absolutely. Now, that's a little bit extreme, but the point is that it takes high intensity. So back to what I was getting ready to finish up with the subject is the fact that whenever I have a question as far as have I done enough, I ask myself, should I do one more? And if the answer is yes, then 100% of the time, that answers my question. I do one more. And then after I do that last set, if I ask myself, should I do another one? The answer is always 100% no. So it pretty much boils down to that last set. Now, what does it take to get there? That's going to be very individual. It's going to depend on the muscle group. It's going to depend on the exercise. It's going to depend on kind of how you feel that day. But ultimately, there's a certain threshold that we meet. And I kind of liken it to, pardon the analogy, but it's kind of like making love. Sometimes it takes a long time to build up to the finish. Sometimes it goes really quick. But what is the objective? It's finishing the job, right? Well, it's the same thing with exercise. Regardless of how you get there, there are many different ways to skin a cat, many different modalities. You take 100 champions, I can guarantee you each and every one of them has a different workout. Now, you're going to listen to one and say, well, he does this, so therefore that's the only way or the best way. There is no such thing as a best way. because there's too many variables. Ultimately, it's just about certain basic fundamental principles that work, applying them properly, and getting the end result.